What would you think if you heard a story about yourself? It can be a really valuable way of thinking. Let me explain. Hey, you, it's AD Roundtree. How are you? Welcome to this, your Thursday edition of the show. Yeah, Thursday. You know what that means? That means this time tomorrow, you will have officially made it through yet another week. This is no small accomplishment. You're doing awesome. Hang in there. You got this. You are a badass. And if you need something, if there's anything I can do for you to make your Thursday better, hit me up. I'm here with you. I'm here for you. At ADSXE. It's where you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at ADSXE. Put it in your phone now in case you need it later. So, what would you think if you heard a story about yourself? Look, like I said, this can be an incredibly valuable way of thinking. If you are struggling, if you are suffering, if you are in a predicament and you need to get yourself out of that predicament, if you need to extricate yourself from a sticky situation, well, this can be a fantastic way of getting from A to B. And I bring this up because you might recall, if you heard it yesterday on the podcast, we got an email from a woman who had come to the end of a relationship with someone who she was in love with. Sadly, this person was an alcoholic. They were living together. She kicked him out of her home, but they continued to have a romantic relationship. They continued to be in love, or so she thought. It turns out he started seeing someone else, and he was really only holding on to the relationship with her because, well, she did really awesome supportive things for him, like drive him to and from work, help him get medicine when he couldn't afford it, do his laundry, things of that nature. She wanted to support him. She loved him. She wanted to see him turn his situation around. But it wasn't acceptable for her to have an alcoholic living with her under her roof, so she told him to hit the bricks. And, well, he found himself someone else. And it left her empty. Felt like he'd taken everything from her. And she wondered how she could start feeling good about herself again. And look, this is a complicated, difficult situation. It's always going to feel like a kick in the gut when a relationship with someone you love comes to an ending. It's not an easy thing. But from the outside looking in, I went, what do you mean? You have every right to feel good about yourself. You want to know why? Because you stood up for yourself. You had some boundaries. You had some backbone. Things did not work out the way you hoped. He didn't clean himself up. But what I see is a strong person who should feel good for herself, should feel good about herself no matter what, because she had enough self-respect to say, this is not working. Get out. It's unacceptable for you to live under my roof like this. And as much as it sucked that he started seeing someone else, as much as that hurt, the end result was she had someone who was, well, kind of leeching off her, really, honestly. You see it, I see it. She couldn't see it, maybe necessarily at the time. And, well, because she had too much self-respect, he was forced to move on to somebody else who would enable that kind of behavior. Now, it sucks that he didn't clean himself up, that he didn't do the right thing, that he did not say, you know what, you're worth so much to me that I'm going to clean up my life. I'm going to put the bottle down. I'm going to seek treatment, and I'm going to get my life together so I can be a better person for you. That would be fantastic, but that is not how an addict's mind works, sadly. It's tough not to take it personally, but you should really try not to take it personally in this situation. And so we talked about that and how I could see from the outside looking in that she had every right to feel good about herself. Her question was, how can I feel good again? And I was like, you should feel great. You should feel chock full of self-esteem. You bet your sweet bippy you should be feeling good about yourself because, well, look what you did. You set some boundaries for your life. You found something in it that wasn't acceptable and you didn't put up with it. You had enough self-respect to rip that Band-Aid off. And as much as the end result wasn't the one you wanted, it was the right thing. And, well, this is why I say it can be valuable when you stop thinking about yourself as yourself. When you start kind of trying to take a look from the outside. And she wrote me back today after hearing the podcast and said a little bit of backstory so you can understand maybe why I felt that was acceptable to put up with. It's hard. It's hard when you are going through it. She said, everything that you said about me makes sense. And it's the same thing I would say to a friend. But it's hard when it's yourself going through it, as I'm sure you know. She said a little bit of a backstory so you can understand maybe why I felt it was acceptable to put up with that. I felt the need to respond because it does sound kind of pathetic that I did. No, it doesn't. When you're in it, it can be very, very hard to see. And you know what? You say you put up with it, but really you didn't. You set a boundary. You said, this is not acceptable in my life. You're going to have to get out. It's not pathetic. You identified a problem and you did something about it. Shows a lot of courage, gumption, strength, and backbone. Not pathetic, just so we clear that up right now. She said he was my high school boyfriend, my first love, and a wonderful person at that time. We dated for 3 years in high school, and we only went our separate ways because his family moved. I didn't sit there and pine over him since high school. We both moved on, married, had kids, etc. But throughout the years, I thought about him from time to time and wondered how he was and what it would be like to be back in touch. The invention of Facebook made that happen, and we found each other in 2017 and reconnected. We got back into a relationship pretty quickly, and before I knew it, we had decided to move in together in 2018. I did not know the nature of his alcoholism. And that's the reason I let it go on as long as I did, which was until June of 2021 when I asked him to move out. Since then, he's been living in a hotel. I keep thinking I could help him get better, or I kept thinking I could help him get better, so that's why I was helping with rides and laundry. But I realized that he was not the sweet boy I fell in love with in high school. I guess that's why I've tried to hang on as long as I have and why the betrayal hurts so much. Thank you so very much for listening to me and helping me through this. Well, thank you for sharing your story, because I can tell you, after we talked about it on the show, I got pretty much deluged with emails and messages and things of that nature. People had gone through a similar thing saying, you know, when you're in it, it's so hard to see. If you are with an addict and maybe you're enabling that addict, maybe you are enabling them to continue their life, which is only partially functional, and you're allowing them and enabling them to continue feeding their addiction, it can be really, really difficult to see that. Can't see the forest for the trees. And that's the thing that I heard over and over again from people that messaged me about your story. One, they're proud of you for standing up for yourself, for having some backbone, for recognizing that you were worth more than the situation you were in, and realizing this was an unhealthy thing and you had to draw a line somewhere. And not only that, everyone who messaged me about this had a similar experience where they were in it and didn't see it at the time. And this is why it can be incredibly valuable to think, well, what would I think if I heard a story about myself? You're struggling, you're suffering, you're unhappy about something, anything, any kind of problem, any struggle. It doesn't have to be a relationship thing. It doesn't have to have anything to do with relationships with people who are addicts. It doesn't have to do anything. It doesn't have to have anything to do with anything we're discussing. But for you, for me, for all of us, for people in this situation, it can be so valuable to try your very best to step outside of yourself. If you are struggling, if you are suffering, if you have a problem that you are ill-equipped to overcome and you're trying to figure it out, this is what I do, or this is what I've been told to do. And when I can remember to do it, it works pretty well. What would you think if you heard a story about someone in your situation? If you heard a story about a woman who fell in love with her childhood sweetheart, reconnected, they moved back in. But things weren't necessarily all that good. He wasn't really functioning. He didn't have it together to have a car. He didn't have it together to do his own laundry. He didn't have it together to be able to hold down a job to make all of these things reality. And on top of that, he had a drinking problem. If you heard a story about someone who reconnected with their high school sweetheart who had become an alcoholic that struggled to hold down a job, what would you say? You'd probably say, oh, that person. Well, there's deep romantic bonds that go all the way back to childhood. Those feelings are strong. Nostalgia is powerful. For the same reason that we like watching old TV shows, we like eating the same cereal that we had as kids, we like going back to the places where we used to hang out as teenagers, we like listening to our favorite records from when we were going through pivotal moments in our lives. Nostalgia is a powerful thing. You would say, they're kind of romanticizing the past, and this is an unhealthy situation, and it probably shouldn't be allowed to continue. And it's amazing if you step outside yourself and look at the situation, what it can do for you, no matter what it is, whether it's a relationship, whether it's professional, whether it's any kind of personal struggle you're having. My father, who passed away a little while ago, he found, I think, great joy and great happiness in kind of being a senior advisor. Toward the end of his career, he'd seen it all, done it all as a lawyer. He worked as an international lawyer starting out in the 1970s. He specialized in Eastern European law, did telecom deals with Russia in the 1970s, and saw everything that you could imagine someone in that situation would see and more. He dealt with all kinds of crazy situations, from the time that he was starting out as a lawyer doing telecom deals in Russia to the time that he worked in the energy business, from the time that he had a crisis of conscience and switched lanes. He went from doing telecom and energy business deals to working with human rights organizations, working with, anytime there was a plane load of people about to find themselves in a very difficult situation because of some sort of international political situation, a war or something of that nature, my father would be in the mix doing everything he could to help people who were incapable of helping themselves. It's amazing that all this stuff with the Ukraine kicked off when he did, not long after he passed away, because he would have been up to his elbows in it. I just know he would have. He would have found ways to help. He would have found ways to get involved. He would have hopped the first flight he could to the worst situation he can put himself in order to do something to help others. But a big part of his role later on in life was taking his huge amounts of experience and kind of coaching younger lawyers through difficult and uncharted things, because he'd seen it, done it, read the book, bought the t-shirt, all of the above. And he was really good at making you observe yourself from a different perspective. You know that thing about that we started the whole conversation with, what would you think if you heard a story about yourself? My father did that to me once, to great effect. I love what I do for a living, but over the past several years, if you talk to anybody that works in broadcasting or radio, they will tell you that the workload has gotten exponentially bigger. And there were a lot of folks that got to a point where there was very little of their life left. This happens in all sorts of career areas. And especially since the COVID situation happened, there's more work and less people to do it. And I remember telling my father once, I was dealing with a situation where there was more and more kind of getting heaped on. Hey, this will just take 5 minutes. This will just take 10 minutes. Can you do this? Yeah, quick email. Take 10, 15 minutes of your time. Well, there's only so many 10 and 15 increments of the day until you're all out of day. And I was hitting threshold, breaking point, a point where I could not do it anymore, a point where I wasn't really sleeping, a point where I was running on fumes. And I remember talking to my dad about this. And then I talked to him about it again a year later, 6 months later. It was a recurring thing. And he was like, well, you should tell people. You should tell the people that you're working for that you're hitting your breaking point and you can't do it. And I did. And I would say it over and over again. And they would go, yeah, tough. Yeah, that is rough. I'll try and get some sleep. But can you do this? It'll only take 10, 15 minutes. I remember talking to my father about it. And he was like, you keep telling people that you can't do it anymore. And then you continue to do it. It's been going on for a couple of years now. And I was like, oh God, oh, you're right. And my dad said, what would you think? What would you think if you heard about someone who is saying, this won't do. I can't do this anymore. I won't do this anymore. Yet continued to do it. Do you think the people he was telling that would respect his decision or believe him? Or would it be more like the boy who cried wolf? I was like, oh my God, it's so obvious. It's so simple. And once I saw myself through my father's eyes, who wasn't really looking at me at the time like his son, just like a person that he'd heard a story about, it was so different. I was like, how could I forget to step outside myself in that way? It's something that served me well over and over again. But when you're in it, whatever it is, whether it's an unacceptable amount of work that you're trying to get through every single day just to keep the wheels of commerce turning, whether it's a relationship with an alcoholic who's taking advantage of you and using you to support their addiction, whether it's any one of these situations or something completely different, when you are in it so many times you are so mired in it that it can be very difficult to see the forest for the trees, as the expression goes. It can be very difficult to really think through things logically and clearly. But if you can, try this. Next time you are struggling, next time you are suffering, next time you hit a wall and you can't figure out a way over or around it, try thinking about yourself from the outside. What would you think if you heard a story about someone who is in your situation? Forget it's you. Forget that the people you know are involved. Forget all the other stuff. If you depersonalize it and treat your life as a story, what would you think about a story of someone who is going through what you're going through? It can be an incredibly valuable thing. And not only that, when you start picturing it in that way, when you start thinking of your situation, your struggles as a story, well, it gives you the opportunity to write your own. That is it for me. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you for being a part of my radio family. As always, this time that you and I spent together, it's the best part of my day. I'll be back tomorrow. We'll do it all over again. Have a great one. Later.